Hey boys and girls, this is Mr. Villard, and today we're going to read this book, Introducing Australia. Introducing Continents, Australia by Anita Ganeri. This is an important feature of a nonfiction text is the table of contents. The table of contents tells you what chapters are in your book, what subjects are going to be covered, and what pages they start on. So if you want to read just about the plants of Australia, you can go to page 16. So the table of contents can be very helpful if you don't want to read the whole entire book. These are other features of nonfiction text. We have a map, and it shows you where Australia is. It's marked in dark green. This is a table or a graph that you will also see in nonfiction books that gives you information. And this gives you quick facts. So I'll read the graph first, or the table first. Australia fact file. Area, 2,966,136 square miles. Population, 22 million. Number of countries, 1. Highest mountain, Mount Kosciuszko at 7,310 feet. And the longest river is the Murray-Darling at 2,376 miles long. About Australia. A continent is a huge area of land. There are 7 continents on Earth. This book is about the continent of Australia. Australia is the world's smallest continent. Australia is a huge island. It is surrounded by the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Australia also includes the island of Tasmania to the south. Famous places. There are many famous places in Australia. Some are modern. The Sydney Opera House opened in 1973. It has become one of the most famous buildings in the world. Its roof looks like a ship's sails. And another feature of nonfiction text that you're going to see are little descriptions of the pictures. So if you see a little comment in a little box, that will tell you about what the picture is about. Sometimes it'll label the picture. This one says, the Sydney Opera House stands in Sydney Harbor. So, look for these little comments in the boxes that describe pictures. They can give you some good information. Uluru stands 1,100 feet high. It used to be called Ayers Rock, and this rock is supposed to glow red at sunset. Some famous places are very old. Uluru is a giant hill of red rock in central Australia. It is a sacred place for the Aboriginal people. It has many caves and ancient rock paintings. Geography. Huge dry deserts cover large parts of Western and Central Australia. The biggest is the Great Victoria Desert. It is famous for its red sand dunes. And we have a caption right here. The Great Victoria Desert has sand dunes, pebbly plains, and salt lakes. And right here, Mount Kosciuszko is in the Snowy Mountains in southern Australia. I did not know that there was snow in Australia. A long line of mountains runs down the eastern side of Australia. It is called the Great Dividing Range. To the south is the highest mountains in Australia, Mount Kosciuszko. It is 7,310 feet tall. The Murray and Darling rivers join up to make the Murray-Darling River. It is the longest river in Australia. It flows for 2,376 miles from the Great Dividing Range into the ocean. The land around the Murray-Darling River is good for farming. Lake Erie is the biggest lake in Australia. It is filled with salt water, but often dries out in the heat. The lake has only been full of water 3 times in the last 100 years. Look at all the salt deposits it leaves behind. Lake Erie almost empty here. It fills up again after heavy rains. weather. Most of Australia is hot, dry weather. When it is very dry, there is a risk of brush fires breaking out. The far north and northeast have warm weather with lots of rain. Bushfires spread very quickly in the ground if the ground is dry. In Australia, Christmas in the summertime. Some Australians spend Christmas on the beach. Australia is in the southern hemisphere. It has opposite seasons to the north hemisphere. Winter lasts from June to August, and summer lasts from December to February. So Christmas in December, it's summertime there. Animals. Australia's most famous animals are marsupials, such as koalas and kangaroos. These are animals that carry their babies in pouches. Many unusual birds also live in Australia, such as kookaburras and emus. A kangaroo carries its baby or joey in its pouch. The Great Barrier Reef stretches along the northeast coast of Australia. It is the biggest coral reef on Earth. It is home to an astonishing number of animals. They include around 1,500 types of fish. Thousands of multicolored fish swim on the Great Barrier Reef. Plants. Many unusual plants grow in Australia. Eucalyptus trees, sometimes called gum trees, grow all over the continent. Their leaves make a strong-smelling oil. Eucalyptus leaves are the favorite food of koalas. Koalas eat so many eucalyptus leaves that they smell of eucalyptus. The seeds of the Sturt's desert pea can sprout very quickly after a shower of rain. The Sturt's desert pea is a plant that grows in the desert. It has branches of bright red and black flowers. Its seeds lie in the hot ground. They grow very quickly as soon as it rains. Natural resources. Australia has many natural resources. About 2/3 of the land is used for farming. In the dry outback, farmers keep sheep on enormous farms. The sheep are mainly kept for their wool. These merino sheep are raised for their soft, fine wool. The digger is working on an opal mine in Australia. Many metals, such as gold and iron ore, are mined in Australia. There are also huge diamond mines. Most of the world's opals come from Australia. The continent is also rich in oil, gas, and coal. And this is a polished opal. People. About 22 million people live in Australia. Most people are descended from Europeans who settled in Australia. Other people have come from Asian countries, such as China and Vietnam. These Australian school children come from many different backgrounds. These Aboriginal children are dressed in traditional costumes for dance. The Aboriginals were the first people to live in Australia. They came from Southeast Asia around 40,000 years ago. They used to move from place to place, but now they live in cities and towns. Sports and culture. Sports are very popular in Australia. Many Australians play or watch cricket, rugby, and Australian rules football. Australian rules football is played on an oval-shaped field. It is like a cross between rugby and soccer. These men are playing Australian rules football in Melbourne. No helmets. This Aboriginal artist is creating a dot painting. The Aboriginal people have their own art and music that is thousands of years old. They paint pictures using dots of different colors. The paintings usually show animals or pictures of Aboriginal stories. Countries. There is just one country in the continent of Australia, and that is Australia. Australia is divided into 6 states and 2 territories. The largest Australian state is Western Australia. This map shows the states and territories of Australia. So there's Western Australia, Northern Territory, South Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania. This is one of the islands that make up Fiji in the South Pacific Ocean. Australia is part of a much bigger region called Oceania. Oceania also includes New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and thousands of islands in the South Pacific Ocean. Cities and countryside. There are many big modern cities in Australia. Canberra is the capital of Australia. It is home to the Australian Parliament. Sydney is the biggest city. It is famous for its harbour and harbour bridge. The famous harbour bridge in Sydney is made from steel. A flying doctor arrives at the scene of a car accident. People in the outback often live far away from cities and towns. If people get sick or have an accident, a flying doctor goes out to visit them in a plane. Some children live in the outback. Some children living in the outback have to do their schoolwork by radio or on the computer. Fun facts. Australia is a huge island. It is also a continent and a country. 8 of the world's 10 most deadly snakes live in Australia. In Australia, there are about 3 sheep for every 1 person. More than 3/4 of Australians live in towns and cities. Quiz. What is the capital of Australia? I was wrong. I thought it was Sydney or Melbourne, but it's Canberra. Who were the first people to live in Australia? Aboriginals. Does Australia lie above or below the equator? It's below the equator. That's why they have Christmas in the summertime. Name 2 types of marsupials. Those are animals with pouches. So a koala and a kangaroo. This is the glossary. The glossary gives you great information about words that are in the book, and it tells you their definitions. Aboriginal, first people to live in Australia. Continent, one of the 7 huge areas of land on Earth. Coral reef, rocky structure built by tiny sea creatures. Descended from, that means related to something long ago. Desert, hot, dry place that has very little rain. Marsupials, animals that carry their young in pouches. Mind, dug up from under the ground. Natural resources, natural materials that we use such as wood, coal, oil, and rock. Opal, it's a type of precious stone. Ore, rock that contains metals. Outback, dry land in the middle of Australia. Parliament, a group of people that make a country's laws. Sacred, special or holy. Saltwater, water that is salty like the ocean. Sand dunes, huge piles of sand in the desert. States, areas of Australia that make their own laws. Territories, areas of Australia with their own laws. If you want to find out more about Australia, there's a list of books right here that you can look at. And this is a list of websites you can go to if you want to learn more about Australia. And this is another very important feature of nonfiction text. This is the index. The index tells you words that are in the book and what pages they are located on. So, flying doctors on page 27. Okay, Indian Ocean is mentioned on page 5. Tasmania is also mentioned on page 5. People mentioned on page 20 and 20 to 21. So if you can't get the information about where to look in the book from the table of contents, you can always flip back to the index and look for something that might help you know where to look in the book to get your information. So if I just want to learn about their deserts, I would go to page 8 or page 17. That's where deserts is mentioned. The index is a very useful and helpful part of a nonfiction text. This has been a book called Introducing Australia. I hope you liked it.